Announcements this morning. First, the Women's Night Out. The announcement that was in the calendar neglected to say the date, which is Monday, October 9th. And there's a yellow pad in the lobby for those who wish to sign up. A few announcements from the Sacred Grounds Committee. As you probably have noticed, there's some changes afoot outside. The committee would like you to know the following. From October 2nd to the 6th, the building will be open, but access will be restricted to the door in the far end, in the community room, the side door. Next Sunday, October 8th, the front door, patio, and steps will all be available, but there's going to be a new patio extension, and that section is undergoing repairs and will be roped off. From October 9th through the 13th, additional work will continue outside. And on October 15th at the service, the full new patio will be available. So in short, just take precautions, know what day, if you were arriving at the church, which door is open, what may be roped off, and prepare accordingly. An announcement about the upcoming auction. As you know, our auction is the principal fundraiser for the year. Donation forms for this year's auction are due October 10th. If you need suggestions or have any questions about the auction, feel free to speak with Carol Lavoie on the church patio after this service. And then finally, a message from the Social Justice Committee. Today is the final chance to order your Side with Love t-shirts. You can get one in either blue or gold, and the sizes are up to 4X. So please look in last Friday's newsletter for all the details about how to order. And please don't delay, because after today, t-shirts are gone, and they're not reordering additional ones. So with that, we can bring in our service with the ringing of the Tibetan bowl.
Good morning. Before I share my call to worship and we continue our service, I want to let you know that for the last couple of years, we have been relying on a really wonderful but free captioning service that was the labor of love of someone out there on the internet, and that person has decided to discontinue that service. We are in the process of experimenting with other ways, and we have a couple of other ways we can do it. And this morning we're having some technical difficulties with one of those ways. And so, unfortunately, we do not have captioning today. I apologize for that. As we gather together this morning, may we learn to recognize and affirm the pieces of possibility, the bits of goodness that we each bring. May we encourage rather than control, love rather than possess, enable rather than envy, allowing our individual gifts to weave a patchwork of peace. The soft, deep blue of sensitivity and understanding, the red energy of creativity, the white heat of convictions, the risky, fragile green of new growth, the golden flashes of gratitude, the warm rose of love. Each of us is indispensable if we are to minister to a broken and wounded world. Together, in our gathered diversity, we form the whole. Come, let us worship together today. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we sing our opening hymn, number 22, Dear Weaver of Our Lives Designs. The words will be on the screen.
And now, as Rev Ian lights our chalice, please read along our unison and aspiration. The words are on the screen. May love be the spirit of this church. May the quest for truth be its sacrament, and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration. And now I invite Jane to come forward to light the BIOPOC candles. And as she does so, please read along the words on the screen. We light these candles in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and other people of color as we journey towards spiritual wholeness. As the loving community, work to dismantle racism, all forms of oppression. May we live out our principles so that justice, dignity, and equity for all prevail. This morning we have a reading, Weaving Wisdom by Keith Goheen, and it goes as follows. The ancient prophets knew people as social beings, and they believed that the wisest way to care for the people was by caring for the community. Like all religious ancestors, modern Unitarian Universalists prize the interconnectedness of all life. We hold a deep appreciation for the ways that our lives intertwine. Like fabric figures, we are woven into being amid life's grand tapestry. In the weaver's craft, fabrics contain cords that lend strength, acting like the material skeleton, unnoticed by the casual viewer, but critical to the piece's wholeness. The cords determine the fabric's integrity. A variety of other threads flesh out the material, constituting the appearance, providing character through bulk, color, and texture. Together, the cords and threads produce a whole greater than its parts, a durable, artistic rendering. Human society can be viewed as a grand tapestry, born of sturdy universal cords and entwined with a multitude of diverse threads that spin out into a wildly imaginative composition. This fabric, however, never leaves the loom. It continues playing out its potential for creation. Dynamic threads adapt, transmute, and expire as they enjoy a certain freedom to choose their paths among the ever-lengthening universal cords. Where there is close agreement, threads form strong, tightly woven clusters. When they fail to form a cord, tangles and gaps appear in the emerging work. The quality of life's tapestry depends heavily on the thread's desires. The prophet Micah reminded the people of Israel that the quality of their societal and personal lives relied on their relational desires. He called them to make choices reflecting a reverence for life's enduring qualities and urged them to intentionally harmonize the threads of their lives with the eternal cords of the living tapestry. Like Micah's people, we bear imperfections, and despite our best efforts at discerning and cultivating human wisdom, our vision remains limited. Reform and revolution are regular and prominent within the broader community of human history. Through our history of tweaking and tumult runs the binding cords to which we can return for healing and inspiration. People need to be in relationship, and that primordial desire sustains us, even when the relative prominence of particular values shifts. Religion remains a potent value within the social fabric's unfolding story. Compared to our forebears at the dawn of Protestantism, however, we are facing a far more complex religious pattern woven through a decidedly more varied social tapestry. Values long assumed to be universal are proving to be transient in character and regional in constitution. We need to develop, sustain, and modify the strands of our social networks in response to an increasingly diverse set of social relationships. And now,
breathe deeply into your own heart. Feel your connection to this community or to your broader community. Feel a deep connection to the world around you. Breathe in the air of this sacred place. Let yourself feel the connection to the deep love that embraces all. Today, our prayer will be sung rather than spoken, and I invite you, as you hear it, as you are moved, to join me as you're singing. If you feel like you don't want to join, you just let the words and the sounds move through your heart. But join me as you feel comfortable. We will sing it a whole bunch, and then once we're finished, we will pause in silence for a little while. Weave and spin, this is how our work begins. Mend and heal, take the dream and make it real. Weave and spin, this is how our work begins. Mend and heal, take the dream and make it real. Weave and spin, this is how our work begins. Mend and heal, take the dream and make it real. Weave and spin, this is how our work begins. Mend and heal, take the dream and make it real. Weave and spin, this is how our work begins. Mend and heal, take the dream and make it real. Weave and spin, this is how our work begins. Mend and heal, take the dream and make it real. Weave and spin, this is how our work begins. Mend and heal, take the dream and make it real. May all beings know peace. May all beings know love. May all beings know an end to suffering. My friends, will you join your voices together again as we sing our hymns for meditation, Spirit of Life, Fuente de Amor. We talk about community a lot here, and we use a lot of metaphors when we talk about community. We sometimes use the metaphor of a family, or a body, or a building. And every metaphor we use gives us a different lens to see what we're doing and who we're striving to be and how we might shape our life together. You may have noticed, it's been a little heavy-handed, that we've been using weaving and spinning as metaphors a lot throughout this service. And we do use the metaphors of weaving and spinning when we talk about our lives. We talk about the fabric of our lives. We talk about hanging from a thread. Threads of email conversations. We talk about moral fiber and social safety nets. When we think about the music, like the music of Bach that Chip just played, we think about the voices weaving themselves together, especially in a fugue. I want to spend some time today exploring weaving fabric as a metaphor for creating and living in community, as a metaphor for interdependence. As we begin our year-long practice of reflecting on new language that we have to express our Unitarian Universalist values. This month, we're going to be exploring interdependence. And for those of you who've been here before, you know we've talked about the changes in our documents that talk about our values. And one of those values we talk about is interdependence, and this is what those words are. We honor the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And with humility and reverence, we covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation, creating and nurturing sustainable relationships of repair, mutuality, and justice. Note that as we go through this year with this, every statement includes a description of the value, interdependence, to us, and what it might mean to us, and a promise, a covenant that living in and through that value calls us to. As we reflect today and in the weeks to come, I'm less interested in telling you something certain than in opening up our minds to possibility, to sending you forth with more questions than answers, annoyingly sometimes I think, to suggesting a lens you can look through on your own and together over the coming days. It won't be perfect, but I hope it might help us see some new things, ask some new questions of ourselves and our congregation and our communities at large. Now, I have not been quiet about the fact that I'm a knitter. Some of you may be tired of hearing about it by now. Creating fabric from string, which is basically what knitting and crochet and weaving and other fiber arts do, doing that with needles by knitting has become really central in my life, to the point where I don't say that I knit, but I say that I am a knitter. I was told early in my learning about knitting that I would not be able to stick with just knitting, that I'd be tempted into exploring backwards, exploring making yarn, spinning and dyeing, or I'd be tempted into exploring outwards. What are the other ways I can use this string to make things? So far, I have resisted the urge to take up spinning and dyeing, but there are other things I've been wondering about. I've had my eye on weaving for a while now. I've a couple of friends who have looms, large and small, and I've been doing some very beginning research about weaving and how it's done. And in my early searching, I found that many people who write about weaving also spend a good deal of time talking about weaving as a metaphor for our lives. Making fabric from string, knitting, knotting, weaving has been a part of human culture for a very, very long time. Some people think that spinning yarn from plants and eventually from animal hair was one of the first activities humans engaged in as we began to live into our full humanity, a first move beyond animal hides in clothing ourselves. The acts of spinning yarn and weaving cloth out of that yarn appear throughout various ancient mythologies. On her Folklore Thursday blog, Frail and Close Hainsworth talks of central pieces of Greek and Northern mythologies. She writes, the Greek fates, or moirae, were usually depicted with yarn and its tools. Clotho spinning yarn on a spindle. Lakis measuring the length of a yarn or a life, and Atropos snipping it off when the end was reached. A simple craft, but recognized as being intrinsic to life and living even then. The idea of a human life equating to a thread in a tapestry weaving in and out is a very old one. The Norns, the northern fates, are also spoken of as spinning and weaving our fates as well. And this idea that human life and our life together could be thought about in terms of thread and yarn and woven fabric is old in intentional thinking as well. Weaving teacher Mary Lou Trinkwarn shares that Plato wrote that weaving could be used as a metaphor to describe the art of ruling and statesmanship. In a turnaround from Homeric societal values based on strength, beauty, and wealth, Plato's democracy, as it was, aimed to create a more just society, which for him meant weaving together social virtues without one dominating the other. Like the herdsman, the shearer, the dyer, the spinner, and the weaver all needed to work together with one aim, to make quality cloth out of society. Trinkwarn also remembers that ancient Egyptians also thought about life itself in terms of cloth and the making of it. They had the same word for weaving and being. Well, what is weaving then? How is it different from other fiber crafts? Simply, it differs in terms of the equipment used, how that equipment and fibers are worked together, and it results in quite a different fabric than, say, knitting or felting. I know you know if you have a shirt at home, you can tell if it's a knit fabric, it'll stretch in certain ways, even if it's a woven fabric, it won't stretch in those same ways. They're very different. In his book about the tradition of kilim rugs, woven rugs from the regions of Turkey, North Africa, the Balkans, the Caucasus, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Central Asia and China, Dario Valcareggi describes it this way. Weaving involves crossing two threads, the warp and the weft, one vertical and the other horizontal, one stretched taut and the other undulating and intertwined with the first. To produce the textile, it is necessary for these two threads to be bound, otherwise each will remain a fragile and fluttering potentiality. If the meeting of opposites does not take place, nothing is created. For each element is defined by its opposite and takes its meaning from it, the warp and the weft. Weaving is about finding the balance between the warp and the weft, between what Keith Goheen called cords and threads that are intertwined in specific ways to create fabric that is visually meaningful, but also structurally able to be used to create objects to be used by the people who create it. Without a strong and stable warp, that's those vertical threads, the fabric won't hold together. It will lack form and structure. There will be nothing for the other threads to be in relationship with. Without weft, those horizontal threads, there will be no character, no beauty, and again, nothing for the warp to be in relationship with, to hold the structure of the fabric. The art of weaving a life, writes Susan Barrett Merrill, is both a metaphor and a means for building the fabric of the self. Weaving is about balance, as you will discover in the thread crossings, vertical and horizontal, one by one, integrate every part into a balanced whole. So I want to look at this metaphor of weaving fabric in a few ways that might help us think about our community and how we see making it strong and vibrant and inclusive. Think back for a moment on some of the words that Stephen shared from Keith Goheen. In the weaver's craft, fabrics contain cords that lend strength, acting like a material skeleton, unnoticed by the casual viewer, but critical to the piece's wholeness. The cords determine the fabric's integrity. A variety of other threads flesh out the material, constituting the appearance, providing character through bulk, color, and texture. Together, the cords and threads produce a whole greater than its parts, a durable, artistic rendering. What if we imagine the warp, the cords of the fabric as the values that we hold central to the life and meaning of our communities? For us Unitarian Universalists, we might imagine that our principles, or the new language we are thinking about, our central values, are those weft, warp cords. They are the things that each of us as individuals and collectively use to bind our community, to build our community around. Over time, they may change, but perhaps they remain very stable and constant. The weft threads, those horizontal threads, that get woven in and around those values, whose beauty and structure are held in those values, might be each of our individual lives and interaction with the community and each other. Now, it may seem a simplistic way to use that metaphor, but for me, it opens us up to thinking about our values as things we are in relationship with, not things that are separate from us, stuck on a wall or a screen. And the beauty and the structure of a woven cloth come from the interaction of color and form, texture and weight, tightness and looseness. When new fibers are introduced into the weft, when we bring new people into our communities, when new ideas are explored, the fabric changes, becomes more varied, possibilities grow. The idea of what is beautiful opens us up to new combinations. Sometimes what is woven into the warp is unusual, unexpected. Different yarn, different size or color, other living matter like leaves and vines and twigs. You've seen, I think, weaving art that has different things than thread woven in. Sometimes made things like ribbon and paper. The fabric that results is new. It's intriguing, richer perhaps, more or less rugged, suggesting new ways of seeing ourselves and our communities as we welcome new and unexpected people and ideas. Now, one of the facts about weaving, about all hand-created fiber crafts, is that it can be time-consuming and sometimes physically challenging. I know that knitters and other yarn fabric creators spend quite a bit of time trying to avoid repetitive strain injuries. I have given myself tennis elbow by knitting. It's true. It takes a good amount of time and focus to set up the warp on a loom, to plan how it will be strung, to allow the kind of fabric desired to be made. And then each strand, one by one, of the weft is passed through the warp needles, every single thread, one at a time. It can take a long time. Knitting is the same thing. The fabric is created one stitch at a time. Hours and hours of something, sometimes finicky work, go into even the smallest pieces of fabric. Creating clothes and blankets to keep warm and dry took up a huge part of the lives of our ancestors and of many people today. I'm thinking especially of the times before the Industrial Revolution brought machines that could produce knitted and woven fabrics in huge quantities. Thinking about those cultures who traveled by boat, on the water, with sails. Before machinery, the time and toil and resources needed to create those sails by hand over and over again. Now, some people might say, isn't it just easier and cheaper to go down to the department or the big box store of your choice and buy a blanket made in a factory? It's cheaper, it's faster. And it's true that the advent of machine knitting and machine weaving opened up possibilities for other focuses in life, and also a shift in status for women in families and communities, and not always a positive one. But what have we lost now that we don't make these things, or many other things, with our own hands? Sister Bianca Haglich of the Religious of the Sacred Heart of Mary in New York City has devoted her life to teaching the art of weaving. She doesn't just see it as sharing a necessary skill, but she feels that she's helping people to become more fully themselves. In weaving, Sister Bianca said, you are constantly facing yourself and your choices that then have to be lived with. In the process of living with them, putting on the warp, weaving it off, finishing the piece, you become closer to your own soul. As for those who go to the dial-up and order-in option, they lose out, she said. We buy things, but they're not part of us. Now, I will be clear that I know that the time and focus needed to make instead of buying clothing and household goods is often a privilege that's not available to many people for economic or social reasons in our culture. But I want to use this idea of things that we make with our own hands becoming part of us to reflect on our community a bit. When we find a new community or participate in one for a long time, we might take for granted that the way things are and the connections that exist there are there for us to consume. The church provides this community for us. And there are times in our lives, challenging, painful times, times of grief or trauma or dislocation, when we need to have our community hold us, when it should be there for us in ways that we don't need to be actively building. But the church, the congregation that provides this support, this community, doesn't exist without all of its members and participants actively engaging in weaving it together every day. It's not a product to be consumed, but something to be lovingly and fiercely focused on with care and intent. Now, there is an entity that is the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert that was here before many of us were here and will be thriving, earth willing, long after we are gone. Perhaps that entity is the loom. But the warp of that community, the values which hold us together, and the weft of that community, the relationships and nurturing and challenging and co-creating that bring life and love to this place, those things are daily work. They require our attention and our intention, our awareness and our regular commitment in order for the fabric we are weaving to be strong and beautiful. Now, one of the challenges of using weaving as a metaphor for community and life is that weavers seem to create a finished project that is really unchangeable once created. Perhaps it implies that we need to start anew each time we wish to add to a new element. Perhaps it's true occasionally that we need to do that, especially when new values enter the picture. But as Keith Goheen says, perhaps we can also imagine that the fabric we're talking about, imagining as community, is never finished. It never comes off the loom, but is woven again and again and again as we interact and choose to be in this community together. Some strands leave and aren't woven with anymore, as some new strands are children's new lives, new members, people returning to us anew or with new understandings of who they are in the world. New strands are added, and the fabric changes. Well, humans, of course, aren't the only animals who create with some sort of string. Many ancient stories tell tales of spiders spinning their webs, and like our weavings, those webs must be functional. They serve a purpose, catching food for the spider. They also bring beauty, at least to us as the beholder. That beauty can be ephemeral, though. Beauty and function can be lost through carelessness or destructive acts. Spiders create great beauty with their webs, but they are also functional, necessary for finding sustenance. In our communities, the ones we labor in relationship to weave and spin are not meant to be created and then admired as objects of perfection. They are living things needing to be rewoven in relationship. Though they're made of strong stuff, they can be gossamer as well, and can be damaged or destroyed by carelessness or destructive actions. Webs and fabric need tending and attention, and our communities need this as well. How are we together today? How is my neighbor doing? What have I been doing? We're getting stuff done, but how's our relationship? As I explore, I'm learning that there is a sense among some weavers, and many people involved in all sorts of crafts, that there is a set number of ways that things can be done in weaving, and that there is a limit to what can be created. Other weavers turn away from that idea and choose to act as if possibilities are endless, and that creativity and commitment are their guides, their hearts and minds open to possibility. That inspires me as I think about weaving community and not just fabric. As I imagine the fabric that we are weaving, the webs we are spinning together, grow as we nurture new possibilities and new hope in relationship with each other and in relationship with the values that we hold dearly together. May we weave wisely in curiosity and love. May it be so. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we sing together our closing hymn, We Are. The words are on the screen.
And now Rev Ian is going to extinguish our chalice. And as he does, please read along the words that are on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, and warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
My gratitude today is for all of those who made today possible, who helped us weave the structure and the presentation of this service. Thank you to all of you for making this possible. Those of you who join us just before 10 o'clock, there are folks here at 8:30 and 9 o'clock getting chairs set up and audio-visual ready, getting the piano going, making sure that the candles are all lit. And so I want to say thank you to all of those who help weave this worship today. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor said, "We don't accomplish anything in this world alone, and whatever happens is the result of the whole tapestry of one's life and the weaving of individual threads from one to another that creates something. Knowing the responsibility and the joy of weaving a life, a community, a family of justice and love rests in our hands, knowing that rests in our hands, that responsibility and that joy. Go in peace, my friends, to love and serve the world."